I'd like to, it's my great pleasure to introduce our next panelist. Carlton McCoy is the CEO for all of the estates under the Galen Lawrence umbrella. And I've been so impressed with the way that they've bought these historic estates like Heights, Burgess, Stony Hill, and really distilled out the purest essence of what makes these historic estates so special. And they've really elevated all of those properties. Haynes is an interesting case in that it's a vineyard in Coombsville that has a very long history. In fact, if you think of Coombsville as one of the more recent Napa Valley AVAs and the most southern, has a very long history that goes back several decades, but there's a few estates that really are iconic within that. Haynes is one of them. They bought the vineyard and then created an estate out of it. There had been a winery there before. I visited many times as we were doing our Coombsville map, and when I tasted these wines, I was just blown away. So, Carlton, thanks so much for being here and for sharing this wine. And I think it's a beautiful wine at the end of the tasting. The Paulmeyer shows the richer side. Both wines show the kind of the two sides of Napa Valley Chardonnay. In the Paulmeyer, you've got that creamier, more textured side, and here you have a little bit more of a mineral-driven kind of expression, and that's why I picked these two wines to show you the different facets of Napa Valley Chardonnay. So, Carlton, it's all for you. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Antonio. So as you mentioned, our entrance into the Napa Valley was through the acquisition of Heights Cellar, which we're really honored and very blessed to continue that legacy. So when we had the opportunity to buy the Haynes Vineyard, it was really in our wheelhouse of historical preservation. The Haynes Vineyard was a property that was purchased from Nathan Coombs in the 1860s by this family, but it wasn't developed until the 1960s when Andrei Telechev approached Patricia Haynes, who we bought the vineyard from, to develop the vineyard. She wasn't involved in viticulture at that time, so she said, sure, but you'll have to sort of decide what's going to be planted, and I'll take it from there. So the original vineyard was developed with also Winty clone Chardonnay on St. George rootstock and Martini clone Pinot Noir, also on St. George. And one of the reasons why we bought the vineyard, one, obviously, the geology is incredibly unique. There's volcanic soils, but also diatomaceous soils, which are sort of fossilized marine material, which is really rare in the Napa Valley. You find it a lot in the Central Coast and Santa Rita Hills in the far west. And I knew that soil made some of my favorite American Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. But what was really incredible was that they still had the original vines. So the wine you have here is all from Winty clone planted in 1967. We're actually, during the tasting, pouring the Pinot Noir as well, so you'll be able to try that this evening. My previous life was as a master sommelier. I ran wine programs, and my last outpost at the Little Nell was really focused on Burgundy. So my palate, my preference for style was really framed by my experience and, going to Burgundy 3 or 4 times a year. It was a new vineyard. New vineyard for us. We'd had other expressions, but didn't really feel that the vineyard had reached its full potential, hence the reason to go all in-house and to give it one sole expression. So we started by just sort of breaking the vineyard down into small parcels and keeping those parcels separate through the élevage. And we really approached it in the style of what I feel are sort of the best era of white Burgundy, which is sort of the 80s and the 70s and 60s, where these wines had immense texture, but still great structure and acidity. And it's a word that we don't often use in white wine, which is tannin. So if you taste the Chardonnay, there's an enormous amount of tannin in the white wines, which, again, we rarely talk about. So we farm this biodynamically. It's naturally low yielding because they're very old vines. We bring the fruit in typically around 21 bricks, which seems low, but it's because the vineyard's so cold, it's completely unprotected by any mountain. So we get wind all day in the vineyard. We have a very long growing season, so we're able to allow the grapes to sort of hang a little bit longer, but still harvest that very low alcohol potential. We whole cluster press, but we press very, very aggressively because we want all of the solids. We press very, very dirty. Because the pH is so low, we're not concerned with that pH shift. Everything is naturally fermented in larger vessels, 500 to 1,500 liter casks, but very hot as well, because we want to blow off a lot of those sort of fruity esters and get to the core of the terroir of the place. After alcoholic fermentation, we keep it in a very cold cellar because we want to delay malolactic fermentation. So malolactic really doesn't complete typically until spring of the next year when things start to warm up. But at this point, we've added no sulfur. So we typically don't sulfur our Chardonnays until about a year after harvest, but not systemically. We do it one barrel at a time as it's needed, because our general philosophy is we don't add anything to the wine that doesn't need to be there. The wines will continue to age in the cellar, and we don't bottle these until the second summer after harvest, so about 2 years élevage. And that would seem pretty long for Chardonnay, but we don't do racking and we don't do batonnage, so it's sort of lazy winemaking in a sense. We do very, very little. And from this, we were able to see that the Corazon specifically, which is the south-facing part of the hillside, was distinctly very different than the older vines on the north-facing side. But we really didn't know why, because we tracked the temperatures are the same. And it turns out that something I learned in another region I used to visit was the side of the hillside that gets an enormous amount of wind, the grapes naturally produce thicker skins. So we get a lot more phenolics, much more intensity. So we made the decision to bottle it separately, and we continue to do that. So we typically make about 50 to 100 cases of this wine, but it only comes from this sliver that's south-facing that really just gets blasted with wind.